Elon shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes scanning the digital display board. Above the gate, flight 937 to Austin was on schedule. Our blessing on a day like this. Head adjusted the strap of his backpack, feeling its weight dig into his shoulder. He wasn't in the mood to draw attention today. That was why he'd chosen the hoodie. The old pair of jeans and the scuffed sneakers. Even billionaires got tired of the endless stares, the whispers, the impromptu self-fire quests today. He wanted to be just another traveler in the crowd slipping through. At the airport, unnoticed, the line for first-class boarding was shorter than expected, giving him hope for a smooth experience. He had work to do. Email store view and a few notes to jot down for a presentation later that day. The SpaceX team was counting on him, and he thrived under that pressure. As she stood there, his wandered to the charity event scheduled after his meeting. It was for a cause. He cared deeply about providing STEM education resources for underserved communities. He smiled faintly under his hood, imagining the excited faces of the kids who would benefit. But his quiet moment didn't last long. Out of nowhere, a sharp voice pierced his thoughts. "Excuse me." He glanced up, his face is still partially hidden by the hood. A woman was marching toward him, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She wore an expression that could stop traffic, not out of admiration, but because it demanded attention. Elon's gut told him this was going to be one of those moments. "Are you lost or something?" She snapped, her tenors are sharp. Elon didn't respond immediately. He had long learned that in situations like this, patience was key. Elon raised his head slightly, just enough to catch the woman's eyes. She was in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, with a look that exuded self-importance. Her hair was expertly styled, her makeup and her outfit screamed high-end designer, the kind of person who carried herself like she owned the room, or in this case, the airport. "I'm sorry," Elon said, keeping his stun neutral. She let out a huff's thought. The very act of explaining herself was beneath her. "This is the first-class line," she said. "Here ye's narrowing at." She gave him once over. "You don't look like you belong here." Elon blinked, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. He hadn't come to the airport for a confrontation, and he certainly didn't expect me over something as trivial as his appearance. "I have a first-class ticket," he said, simply pulling the hood back slightly to make his voice clearer. Her laugh was sharp, almost mocking. "Sure you," she said, crossing her arms. "Look, I don't have time for games. The economy line is over there." Where she gestured dramatically to the far side of the boarding area. For a moment, Elon debated whether it was worth responding. A younger version of himself might have fired back with a sarcastic quip, but he'd long since learned to pick his battles. He began calmly. "I promise you I'm in the right line. There's no need to but." She wasn't listening. "Don't lie to me," she interrupted, her voice loud enough to turn a few heads. "People like you always try to sneak into places you don't belong. It's not fair to the rest of us who actually paid for our tickets." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Elon could feel the stares now, the weight of dozens of eyes on him. Some people whispered to each other, while others simply watched, unsure of what was unfolding. Elon took a deep breath, keeping his frustration in check. "I assure you," he said, his tone still measured, "I paid for my ticket, just like everyone else here, but Karen wasn't having it. If you don't move, I'll call security," she threatened, her voice rising. Elon glanced around, noticing the growing crowd of onlookers. This was exactly what he didn't want. Attention. Yether, he was standing at the center of an unnecessary spectacle. Karen didn't wait for Elon to respond. She waved down a nearby security officer, her arms slicing through the air like a signal flare. "Officer," she called, her voice commanding attention. This man is trying to cut into the first-class line without a proper ticket. The officer, a stocky man with a neatly pressed uniform, approached cautiously. He scanned the scene, his eyes darting between Karen's flushed face and Elon's calm demeanor. "And what seems to be the issue here?" the officer asked, his tone professional but wary. Karen wasted no time launching into her tirade. "This man," she said, pointing an accusatory finger at Elon, "clearly doesn't belong here. He's holding up the line and making a scene. I demand you remove him immediately." Elon tilted his head, his lips pressing into a thin line. He wasn't a stranger to moments like this where someone's snap judgment became the fuel for unnecessary drama, but he also knew that responding with anger would only escalate the situation further. "Sir," the officer said, turning to Elon Doy, "you have your ticket with you." Without a word, Elon reached into his backpack and pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper. He handed it to the officer, who unfolded it and examined the details carefully. The officer's eyebrows lifted slightly. "This is a first-class ticket," the said, glancing back at Karen. Karen's face twisted in disbelief. "That can't be right," she stammered, her voice losing some of its earlier chichi confidence. "Are you sure?" The officer nodded, his expression firm. "Yes, Mom, this ticket is valid." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Whispers of recognition began to take shape, as people leaned closer, trying to get a better look at the man in the hoodie. Karen's voice cracked as she attempted to regain control of the situation. "Well, there must be some mistake. People like him." She stopped herself, realizing too late the implications of her words. Elon's patience had reached its limit. He lowered his hood, fully revealing his face to the crowd. Gas rippled through. Heath the onlookers as recognition dawned on the midst Elon Musk. Someone whispered loudly. Karen's mouth fell open here, eyes widening as she stared at the man she had just accused. The color drained from her face as the weight of her mistake sank in. Elon's expression remained calm, though his voice carried a quiet authority. "It tried to tell you," he said, evenly addressing Karen directly, "but you didn't want to listen." Karen stood frozen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of her humiliation. The crowd around them was no longer silent. Murmurs of astonishment filled the air, and a few people even pulled out their phones, discreetly capturing the unfolding drama. Elon adjusted his backpack and looked Karen directly in the eyes. His voice was calm. Each word carried a weight that demanded attention. "Judging someone by how they look says more about youth, and it does about the person you're judging." Karen's lips trembled as she struggled to form a response, but now words came here. Earlier bravado had vanished, replaced by the unmistakable sting of regret. "You didn't even stop to think." Elon continued, his tone measured but yielding. "You made an assumption, a wrong one, and turned it into a spectacle." The security officer, now fully aware of who he was dealing with, took a step back, giving Elon space to speak. Karen finally managed to whisper, "You didn't mean." Elon cut the hair off, not with malice, but with a clarity that left no room for excuses. "You did mean it," he said, his gaze unwavering. "And you've probably done it before to people who couldn't defend themselves, but today you picked the wrong person." The crowd's murmurs grew louder. A few bystanders clapped softly, and one man called out, "Wells," said. Karen's face flushed crimson. She turned to the officer, desperate for support, but his expression offered nonima. "Am the officer," said his voice firm but polite. "I think it's best if you step out of the line. We need to keep things moving." Karen's shoulders slumped. She looked at Elon one last time, as if hoping for some sign of forgiveness, but hadn't offer it. Instead, he gestured toward the waiting passengers. "Let's not keep everyone waiting," he said, his voice returning to the calm neutrality he had carried at the start of the ordeal. Karen shuffled away, her head bowed, while the crowd parted to let her pass. The whispers and occasional chuckles followed her. As she disappeared into the terminal, Elon turned back. "The security officer, thank you for handling that," he said, simply retrieving his ticket. The officer nodded respectfully, no longer asking questions. As Elon stepped forward to board the planet, the woman behind him in line leaned closer. "That was impressive," she said softly. "You kept your cool." Elon smiled faintly. "Sometimes all you can always stay calm," he replied, "but it's important to remind people that their actions have consequences." As Elon settled into his first-class seat, the exhaled deeply, letting the tension of the confrontation melt away. The cabin was quiet save for the faint rustle of passengers stowing their belongings, and the occasional snippet of conversation. He glanced out the window, the airport bustling below. As the plane prepared for takeoff, his mind wandered back to the scene at the gate. It wasn't the first time he'd faced something like this, and he knew it wouldn't be the last, but there was a deeper sadness in the whole ordeal, a reminder of how often people let their biases dictate their actions. The flight attendant approached with a warm smile, offering him a beverage. He declined, instead pulling out his stable to jot down some thoughts. She was already thinking of ways to turn the encounter into something positive. Maybe a small donation to an organization that focused on tolerance and education, or even a quiet meeting with the team at Tesla to discuss inclusivity initiatives from across the aisle. A young boy peeked over the seat, his wide eyes fixed on Elon. Noticed and whispered, "Yes, that's Elon." The boy grinned shyly and waved. Elon returned the wave with a small smile, thinking how different the world might be if more people carried that childlike curiosity instead of quick judgment. As the plane lifted off, Elon leaned back, letting the hum of the engines drown out his thoughts. He wasn't net to hold grudges, and Karen was all ready. A fleeting memory. What stayed with him, though, was their action of the people around them. The quiet support, the whispers of recognition, and the subtle nods of approval reminded him that progress wasn't about perfection, it was about persistence. Hours later, Elon arrived in Austin, greeted by the energy of his SpaceX team and the eager smiles of the young students at the charity event. Watching the kids light up as they explored the interactive exhibits he'd funded was a moment of pure joy. It reminded him why he did what did not for recognition, but forth. He chanced to make a lasting impact that day as she signed autographs for the kids and spoke to their parents about the importance of STEM education. One thought lingered in his mind. Sometimes the best way to challenge ignorance isn't through anger, but through example. By staying calm and standing firm, he hadn't just defended himself, he'd shown everyone watching that respect and dignity could silence even the loudest prejudice. As she walked away from the event, the caught sight of the boy from the plane. Standing with his parents, the boy waved again and missed him. "Elon, I'll keep over crouching neath him a level. What do you want to be when you grow up?" Elon asked the boy, grinned an inventor like you. Elon smiled, tussling the boy's hair. Then don't let anyone tell you where you belong. Always believe in yourself, the boy nodded, and as Elon walked away, he felt a sense of peace. The day had started with confrontation, but it ended with hope. Subscribe to my channel to stay inspired with powerful stories that highlight humanity, compassion, and the positive impact of leadership in real-life situations.